Furiosa is the latest Mad Max movie to ride out to theaters, but is it worth revving up our engines as well? Hey everyone, welcome to Cinema, where we focus on a film. I'm Josh, this is Simply Cinema. Let me know down in the comments below. Have you seen Furiosa? Is it good, bad, or somewhere in the middle? Or if you're waiting for this review to help you decide if you should see it or not. Make sure to like this video, subscribe if you're ready to join in this film culture community where you talk about the love of cinema as a whole. But going right into the synopsis, panning over 12 years of time, we get Furiosa, who is taken from the green place of mothers, and everything that ensues from all these foes and enemies that she comes about along the way takes her across the way as a prequel to Mad Max Fury Road that leads her as she tries to escape to run back home. And starting off with a positive, overall, I gotta first compliment George Miller as the director of this film, who has gone over 40 years of the Mad Max franchise and still has it going, if not better, like just as a director in his early 80s, and just what he pulls off with all of the stunts, the action, the visuals, creates great cinematography throughout, and you know you're in for a real treat for a film from the very beginning. And just what you get out of all the makeup effects and the action and everything that's displayed on the screen, it's really good. Anya Taylor-Joy is great as Furiosa, but something to note is you don't get her until after the first hour of the film, because it is panning over 12 years of time, and so you're getting this young actress and building up some periods as this film takes place over 5 different segmented chapters that makes it visible on screen of the time she was stolen, as we get to know from Fury Road, to the time we get directly before Fury Road begins. And so how we progress throughout that has a clear insight to how we're progressing and how her character is getting built up, established, and broken down as she's going through all these ups and downs. And you get to see the training she's going through to be the girl she is in Mad Max Fury Road. And so how you set that up, and then going on to Chris Hemsworth as well as Demetrius, how you get Damascus as well, is just so good for the nature, his likable character that has some negative qualities that makes him flawed, but also has a lot of flamboyancy to his character, because he's good, he's lovable, but he's also has this hard heart where he is good by the nature of his role and is very strict to his standings and has a comical relief sort of atmosphere to the nature of his voice, his performance on screen. But the actions he takes are not necessarily the most fun at all. The way he brings out torture, and then bringing in these other villains, these other factions of the franchise as a whole, setting up these different boundaries as you get this post-apocalyptic setting, just creates this great lively environment that is just very different to see on film, as we don't get often in films these days. Just this western desert sort of feel that is taking place essentially in the modern world, but kind of futuristic in a sense because everything's been decimated. And just what you get out of all of these gangs, the culture that is intertwined within is just so lively, feels so alien to us, and yet they make it all feel so normal just because of everything that's set up with all the human inclusions, their motivations and livelihood. And there's almost a political side to when you're creating these different human tribes, that you get these opposing wars, these civil wars that make sense to what they're setting up behind all of these characters. And even with a lot of the characters that don't have a character motive or trait themselves, you see how they are backing up the leader of their tribe especially everything that goes on with the main one that we eventually come to see in Mad Max Fury Road, and just how that is all displayed on screen within these 5 different chapters is segmented well, and it's just a whole lot of fun to be had for all the steampunk setting that you get from all the different vehicles. That creates a great environment to be had, and just all the acting, everything throughout. It just has a great visual appeal that really works wonders to how these performances are actually pulled off. But going into some mixed elements, there's something about the aspects to how it is taking place over 12 years and acting as a prequel to Mad Max Fury Road that we already know what to expect going into it. If you've seen Mad Max Fury Road, if you haven't, maybe you can watch this one first. But overall, for the general vibe of release order, what people may have seen before having watched this acting as a prequel, there's some things where you know certain characters are going to survive, certain characters aren't going to make it, because it's a direct lead up to Mad Max Fury Road, and how that all plays out is good enough for what it's acting as, but it also has the lack of depth to the stakes that are held on screen. Obviously, it does have some stakes, characters are killed off, things are done in certain ways, but there's also the idea that these certain main characters, you know who they are. These certain main characters, you don't know who they are. You haven't met them before. And so you kind of get the gist of where certain things are headed. Not acting as spoilers by any means, but still in the general essence of knowing, I don't know this character, he may not be showing up anymore after this movie. And so how that all plays out is just something that's not necessarily predictable in the grand scheme of knowing how the story is directly going to play out. But from her backstory that she has prologued in Fury Road, and then led into what all this is playing out as, is just showing the essence of her lines, her tragic backstory that you get, that's good enough for what you're asking for of the actual vibes, but it also leaves a question of whether we should have went back to see Furiosa's backstory play out as big and grand as it is. But I also want to bring up the point that I had trouble connecting with some of the parts of the movie where it dragged on a bit too long for its own means. It's the longest of the franchise, being over 2.5 hours, when even Fury Road is 2 hours flat. And so what you take out of that, just the amount of depth and action that you get from Fury Road and not within this, well, there's a lot of action, there's a lot of grand scale things that carry over into the translation of how this story plays out and how well it is written by its craft. There's something about the nature of the story, because there's so much complex details in the political side, how things play out, and just adding that to the general predictability of the essence of certain ideas. Well, you aren't let down by the grand scale of how it plays out. You're still left waiting for some things to build up with a completely unexpected twist, because you're already generally getting what this film is going to be about, even as things don't play out into things the way you're expecting. And so just the general essence of this film has not a sense of predictability, but a sense of disconnection with the stakes that are truly held on screen. And while you can really be satisfied by some of the nature of the film, by just George Miller's directing as a whole being so big and so grand and executing this film really well, overall there's some points of disconnection where I just didn't vibe out with everything that it was going about, especially as it slowed its pacing. It's not that it had too much filler or it had anything too much along that line, but there wasn't an aspect of the connection, whether it was the absence of Mad Max himself or certain other characters or the traits in general. just felt like it played on its plot a bit too long for its own means. I'm not going to say that's a negative to the story because I still was satisfied. I saw where every minute was utilized to its fullest, but it also feels like a story that ought to have been shortened or have been moving forward with the Mad Max Fury Road idea franchise as a whole. And so with that, I can't really say there's any negatives I have to really point out with this film. But overall, it didn't connect with me strongly in the way that I would have liked. And so therefore, I have to rate this film a simply 7.5 out of 10. Let me know down in the comments below if you've seen this film. Is it good, bad, or anywhere right in the middle? Or if you waited for this review and you're going to see it or not based on my review. Let me know all of that. Make sure to like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe if you're not already to join in this film culture community where we talk about the love of cinema as a whole. And I'll be ranking the Mad Max saga very soon, so be sure to look out for that. But make sure to do yourself a favor and go watch a movie.